Hey, welcome to Leaders Underway. This is a channel where we're going to talk about leadership in terms of practical application in day to day life. My name is Eric Moore. I'm a nuclear engineer and I'm a former nuclear submarine officer. So, the more astute listener out there might be asking themselves, okay, I get the relationship between naval officers and leadership. That seems pretty straightforward, Top Gun, whatever. But this guy says he's a nuclear engineer. Okay, aren't these really nerdy guys? They like to hang out in cubicles. They avoid eye contact at all costs, only coming out of their darkened cubicles, maybe to get some coffee, get some lunch and scurry back quickly. And if you're asking yourself that, hey, I get it. I actually agree with you in some important respects. I'm a STEM guy. I've always been kind of a STEM guy growing up. I was really into computers, reading, video games when I was in school, talking about elementary through high school. When I got a little older, I was not a varsity athlete. So I played some sports, but, never was that great, never got kind of to the point where the leadership stuff was really important in athletics. Additionally, I wasn't an Eagle Scout. I wasn't really involved in church. So I didn't get leadership experience from those sorts of activities. Finally, in high school and middle school, I thought student government was the dumbest concept imaginable. And I couldn't be caught dead near anything that looked remotely like that. So I actually found that when I decided to get in the Navy in college, that when I got to officer candidate school for commissioning and to my ship, a submarine, I found that I was at a significant leadership deficit because I had avoided those competencies throughout my young life. Now, I had some exposure to, social life. Like, I'm fortunate to have always had friends that I would do things with on the weekend. I had fun in college. I wasn't all studying. I wasn't like buried in my books or video games constantly. I had a fairly balanced life for a lot of people in STEM sort of work or STEM studies. But I still found that I was at a deficit and I had a lot of work to do to pull myself up. Part of that was looking at my mistakes as I made them, figuring out what I did wrong, and course adjusting. A lot of it was also looking at how other mistakes or how other people handled leadership challenges or situations or interpersonal situations, and then learning from those before I got in that situation. And the combination of making my own mistakes and looking at the mistakes and successes of others meant that by the time that I got to the end of my active duty time, I was doing a lot better. And even better, once I got into the civilian world or the real world, as some would call it, I actually found that I was ahead of my peers in a lot of respects of how to handle these different situations, apart from STEM competency, how to handle different work situations, interpersonal situations, based on my experiences that were painful to come by. Not always the most fun things, but that pain actually drilled the concepts into my mind. So they were just beneath the surface. And for any given situation, I could reach into that sort of corpus or library of experiences and grab something that fit a situation I was dealing with at the moment. So with that said, what I want to do with this channel, and at least in the beginning, is to share some of these stories and then just go through from what I learned from each situation or story. And so the first story which I'll tell today, it's actually not the most impactful. It's not the craziest story. It's just a story that's kind of fun. And I have 3 takeaways from this story. So I'll get started. So this story comes from a time when I was a lieutenant in the Navy. I was, I think, on my 4th or 5th deployment on my platform, a submarine. And I was a lieutenant. I was the assistant engineer. So you don't have to be in the Navy or a nuclear engineer to understand the assistant engineer is an assistant to the engineer. The engineer is a department head. He was my boss. And I had other jobs in addition to this job, but this was one of my main jobs on this deployment. So for the engineering department, which covers the nuclear reactor that we ran for electricity, etc., and the engine room, which is all the other equipment related to the reactor, we had an inspection on this deployment that we had to prepare for. The inspection was called the ORS, the Operational Reactor Safeguards Examination. For a nuke in the Navy, someone nuclear trained who works on reactors, the ORS is a big deal. And the ORS is a big deal for the leadership on the submarine or aircraft carrier, which are also nuclear. It's a big, it makes and breaks careers. So if you're the engineer or the captain on a submarine and you get a good grade from the ORS, that's good for your career. If you get a failing grade, it's very bad for your career. You may not make your next grade you're looking to, your next promotion. If you have your eye on admiral and you fail an ORS, that's up in the air, is my understanding. I didn't make it that far in the Navy. I got out after 5 years, but it makes or breaks careers for captains moving forward. So what do they do in the ORS? What's the big deal? Well, running nuclear reactors is obviously, safety is extremely important. It's paramount. So in order to have safe operations, you have to do your maintenance. You have to have highly trained individuals. And you have to have the right mindset of doing things in a procedural, following procedures, using procedures, stepping through any issues you find in a structured, solid, rigorous manner. So the ORS is looking for some of those characteristics. What they do is the ship will design and run drills, and the ORS will watch as the ship's sailors and officers do that. They see how proficient they are at handling drills or casualty situations, and they see how rigorous the ship is in developing those scenarios and grading those scenarios. The ORS will also have the ship do an examination, the engineering department do an examination. They're not only looking at what are the grades like on the exam, they're looking at how does the engineering department develop the exam, how rigorous is it, how fairly do they grade, are they going to grade it extra nice so that the engineering department looks better than they are, perhaps, things like that. So in addition, they go through maintenance records like crazy. They're looking for any deficiencies, any missing maintenance would be really bad, right? And finally, something a lot of people forget about with the ORS, this is kind of the fourth leg, if you will. They do a monitored evolutions period. And what the heck is that? So this is pretty interesting to me, at least. They will take any reactor or engine room procedure or maintenance activity, and they'll turn it into something that the ORS team will watch. So you can take any procedure, have a sailor or two execute the procedure. They're working on equipment of some kind in some area. Then you take a junior officer or sometimes a chief in the Navy and assign them as a monitor for this activity. They're following through with the sailors as they conduct the maintenance. They're using the procedure as well. And they're kind of critiquing how are they doing? Are they following the procedure? Are they executing it exactly how it's written? And if there's any issues, are they following up on that or taking action appropriately? Then you stack a ORS observer. So that's a senior officer with the ORS board to watch this activity as well. So this person, senior officer, is watching both the people executing, the sailors executing the maintenance activity, and the officer who is watching. So he's watching the watcher. If you haven't done this before, it's very awkward. It's not that fun, usually. So it helps to practice. So my boss, the engineer, we were on deployment. We were going to have the ORS. Later, 6 weeks later, 5-6 weeks later, we're going to have the ORS. And so he comes up to me on a given Sunday, I think, and he says, Eric, I need you to organize a practice period for next weekend. It's going to be a monitored evolutions practice period. We'll do it after lunch in the afternoon on Saturday. Talk to the chiefs, figure out what each division in the engineering department want to do, and let's get a schedule, bring it to me, we'll do it. I said, okay, sounds good, boss. Not that tough of a task. I'm off to the races. I go and find, the machinery division chief. Chief, what do you want to do for Saturday? Eng wants to do a monitored evolutions period. And he'll tell me, let's do activity ABC, put sailors, Z and Y on it. And that sounds good. I go to the next chief, RL division, reactor controls division, EDIV, and the same thing. And I get a schedule together on my clipboard. Everything's good, right? And then I see, the MDiv chief on Tuesday or Wednesday, and he says, Lieutenant Moore, I told you we're going to do evolution ABC. I changed my mind. I think that evolution, DEF would be better. And then I see him on Thursday, and he says, let's do ABC again, but let's do sailors, G and H or whatever. Okay, so they we had a few changes along the way, but I eventually get it into, an Excel spreadsheet or a document. I print off the schedule that's going to be occurring on Saturday. It includes what activities for each division. It includes the sailors involved and the junior officer who's watching the activity as a monitor. Get everyone used to this because it's a weird sort of unusual activity. Get the sailors used to being watched. Get the junior officers accustomed to watching them and how to do that effectively. And so we're off to the races, right? I got all the chiefs to sign off on the plan. I got the engineering department master chief, who is the senior enlisted person in the engineering department, to sign off on it. He liked the plan. My boss, the eng, signed the plan. I printed out all of these schedules. I put them around the ship. I made sure that the individual sailors and officers knew that they were on this watch bill I had created for Saturday. So we're off to the races. Or so I think. So Saturday rolls around. Of course, I would never skip lunch. I have lunch. It was probably sliders or hamburgers. And me and the EDMC go up to the forward compartment, officer country, where the officers' staterooms are. That's where the officers sleep on a ship. They're called a stateroom. And we were in a passageway, which is a hallway on a ship. And we heard a little debate or argument around the corner. We couldn't see around the corner of the passageway, but we could hear voices, and we could hear that they were not happy voices per se. It was the captain and the engineer, my boss. And the captain was saying, this is crap, Eng. No, we're not doing this. This isn't going to work. And the engineer was saying, no, Captain, this is great. This is great training. This is going to prepare the sailors and junior officers for the ORS, for this inspection we have coming up, which is very important. This is why we're doing this. This is why we're doing this. This is why this sailor. And the captain was not having it. And he said, he finally punctuated his point. He said, he bellows, no, Eng, this is crap. And he throws a balled up 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper either at the Eng or at the ground past him. I couldn't see, I didn't have a line of sight, but I actually saw the piece of paper come into my view from around the corner, and he had thrown it. The captain had thrown it. So captain wasn't happy. And I got a sinking feeling in my stomach because I'd been around the block. The submarine community is rough on junior officers. They don't get a lot of love, and they're held accountable for everything, which is good, which is great. They are put in situations where they're going to fail. Not in a catastrophic way that would, most of the time, but they're put in situations that are, above their skill set, and they would fail. That happened to me a lot. That happens to most junior officers a lot. And I knew from being in those experiences that anything that I was connected to, if the captain didn't like it, it was my fault, or that's how it was portrayed. And so I was expected to be pulled aside after this to sort of argument between my boss and the captain. And I was expecting my boss to say, Eric, you screwed up. I can't believe you put me in that situation with the captain. You made me look like crap. You, you ruined this training opportunity this Saturday. Now, I didn't know that I had done anything that wasn't up to snuff, but I just kind of read the writing on the wall. Now, to my boss's credit, he did not dress me down. He did not yell at me. He did not put the blame on me. And I never got an exactly clear picture of what happened, but I think the engineer simply did not brief the captain to his satisfaction in the days leading up to this training evolution. I think that's what it was. It's kind of a moot point at this juncture, but that seems like what occurred. And from this experience, what I did was just regroup. I followed my boss's directions on what to do next. And we put together a schedule that was to the captain's liking for the next Saturday, the next weekend. And we executed it. We executed the training. Everything went great. And we continue to do that every Saturday until the ORS. Doing this training, and it went fine. We got into kind of a pattern, and everything was great. So I have 3 takeaways from this situation. The first takeaway is, in any organization, any hierarchical organization, you can just expect some conflict occasionally that you have nothing to do with. Like, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't overlook anything. Your performance was adequate or great. And leaders above your head, managers above your head, simply have their own internal debates, their own arguments, or their own disagreements. And you will have to recognize that when it happens, not take it personally, because if you get emotional about it, it can be a great detriment. And just flex, figure out what you need to fix or change, fix it, move on, keep it in mind for next time. And from these experiences, the main thing is just adapt and move forward. You can't control when your boss's boss's boss doesn't like a certain train evolution. You can't control, when your boss miscommunicates to their boss something that you have presented or your work product. That's beyond your pay grade. You can kind of begin to look around corners as you get to know your boss, your organization better. But in the beginning, understand you won't know everything, and you can't control a lot of the discussion or debate that's over your head. You just have to figure it out and move on. So that's my first takeaway. My second takeaway is to always have a sense of the communication needs of your management and their predilections as well. So what do I mean by this? In any hierarchical organization, which are most organizations, your leaders are going to have a certain communications appetite and tempo. So by appetite, what I'm getting at is certain details that they want on a periodic basis. And this is going to depend on what business you're in, whether you're in the military or you're, in Fortune 500, or you own your own small business. Your customers, your bosses, they're going to have certain details that they tune in on. You should endeavor to provide information about those details on a tempo or frequency that works for your business. So most businesses, this means you're not going to be calling every 30 minutes to offer updates. There are some domains where you do that, like in financial services. If you're like on Wall Street, you're doing high-speed trading. Of course, that's mostly computers doing that. But you think about the financial markets. That's typically, if you're doing trades, information has a very high tempo. If you're doing nuclear operations, in certain circumstances, information has a very high tempo, especially during problems, right? Other businesses, in real estate or law, it's going to have another type of tempo, right? Depending on the business. So whatever you're doing, try to figure out and anticipate the communication needs that you need to offer up your chain of command, and also information needs and tempo to any direct reports if you have people working for you. So there's a few keys here. One, obviously, the information needs to be relevant to the business. It needs to be offered at a tempo or frequency that's not distracting. Because if you over communicate too much, which we one of those common things we hear is we should over communicate. Well, don't over communicate at a tempo that is distracting, and don't over communicate details which your leadership doesn't care about, because then you'll be judged as being sort of irrelevant. So you got to find that tempo. All right, so that's my second takeaway: communication, tempo, predilections of your leadership and direct reports if you have any. So in this case, the engineer, I think, did not communicate on a tempo or the specific types of information that the captain would want to have before this evolutions period on Saturday. So he got caught unawares, the captain that is, and he didn't like that. And he pushed back. He was quite upset. Third and final takeaway: rhetorical question. Do you think witnessing this sort of argument between my boss and the captain enhanced my perception of the captain's leadership and his leadership competencies, or do you think it was a detriment to my perception thereof? In this case, witnessing this argument from around the corner, it did not enhance my perception of that captain's leadership. And look, these guys, submarine captains, are under an incredible amount of stress. Not only do they have a submarine that they're driving around, typically submerged, there's a nuclear reactor on it. And there may be other stuff we won't even go into on that submarine. So it's a stressful job. They're under an incredible amount of responsibility and accountability that none of us can understand. I can barely grasp it because I haven't been in that position. So, however, that said, in that position, you can't lose your cool on the drop of a hat. And to be fair, he didn't often lose his cool. However, witnessing this situation, how he lost his cool, became emotional, had kind of an emotional display, threw something seemingly at my boss. It just did not enhance my view of his leadership. It was a detriment to that perception. And this leadership is one of those things where perception is very important. You have to consistently demonstrate certain qualities in order to have leadership on a continuing basis. And so my takeaway from that: look, in the real sort of the real world, Fortune 500 company, you have a business, whatever, you have direct reports. Say you call some of your reports into your office, they disobeyed what you call an order or your instructions. You gave them specific instructions, they didn't follow them, and it caused a big problem. Could be loss of a client, could be impact to a schedule. So you think, okay, I'm mad, I'm going to let these folks have it. You call them in your office, you shut the door, and you yell at them. Maybe you pick up a pen off your desk, you throw it at them or throw it somewhere, make some racket. Not the best call. It's a terrible call. It's going to lead to a detriment in their perception of your leadership. It's going to lead to, they don't take you seriously anymore. They saw you lose your cool. It would be better if you have the same meeting, and instead of screaming and yelling and throwing things, try it, lower your volume, lower your tone of voice. You're still communicating with your body language, with your voice, the gravity of the situation, how upset you are, but you're not losing your cool. You're still maintaining control of your emotions. I think that's a much better approach. In addition, how likely do you think it is that if you do this, so yell at them behind closed doors, which it's really not. Someone's going to hear it, and if they don't hear it, they're going to hear about it from those folks, right? So don't think that you can mistreat people behind closed doors and it stays with that person. It's gonna fly to. They're going to tell other people, other coworkers. There's no hiding it. Don't lose control. It's a bad leadership move. So to recap, the takeaways: expect unexpected conflict, especially from over your head in your organization. Adapt, learn, move on. Don't take it personal. Second takeaway would be anticipate communication needs, both in terms of the specific quality or details and the tempo or the frequency, how often. Those are both critical. You need to be relevant in what you communicate. You need to be timely, but not annoying or distracting in the tempo. And finally, always consider how your actions and control or lack of control impacts the perception of your leadership. And don't lose control. Don't throw things. It's a bad move. So hopefully this was at the very least entertaining. I love to think back to this story. It tells a little bit about the spicy environment on a nuclear submarine. There can be a lot of yelling, on certain submarines, certain people, certain personalities. It wasn't always fun in the moment, but it's fun to think about those stories, a decade later. And, if you got anything out of the story, whether just entertainment or you feel like you took something away from this positive for your life, hit the like button. In addition, I'd love to see some conversations around the story in the comments. So if you have any similar situations, similar stories, please share. And any takeaways in addition to or twists on the takeaways I presented, leave those in the comments below. And above all, think about how this applies to your life, professional life, personal life, your family, your friends, whatever. Think about an issue you're dealing with now or an issue you anticipate will come up soon that may be building. And think about how this story might apply to that situation in your life. Because although these stories are from a nuclear submarine far away, my intent with this channel is to make it real for the audience so that you can be a leader underway in your life. Thanks. See ya.